Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Wanis and I have the privilege of working at our Coronado headquarters office as your membership coordinator.
Hi, I'm Morgan McHugh and I work at our office in DC as a project specialist.
And today we're going to be going over the logistics of Lobby Day. Yay! In the wise words of a woman who once gave this talk, if you have any questions, please save them forever because we won't have time at the end for questions.
Thanks, Taylor.
Alternatively, you can look to the CCL veterans around you and ask them your questions because there are a lot of experienced members out here. Our agenda is going to start with me explaining how to take the Metro over to Capitol Hill. Then Morgan will talk to you about how to navigate Capitol Hill, and I'll close this out with some fun reception details. So first, I'm going to go over how to use the Metro. If you picked up a map at the registration desk when you checked in, you can refer to that now. If you need a map, you can also Google Washington, D.C. Metro map. It's really important that you buy a Metro card in advance. This is what a Metro card looks like, and it's the only way to use the Metro. If you do not have a Metro card, you can purchase one at the kiosks in the Metro station. If you're planning on buying your Metro card tomorrow morning, please do show up early to allow for lines and time to purchase your Metro card. Now, let's talk about getting over to Capitol Hill. It's about a 5 to 10 minute walk from the hotel to the Metro station. McDonald's is an unfortunate but really great landmark for the mouth of the Metro station, so you can look for that to find the Metro station. You'll be taking the red line towards Glenmont, stay on the red line for 6 stops, and exit at Union Station.
If you picked up a map of Capitol Hill at registration, we'll refer to those now. If you'd still like one, you can grab some. There's a few sitting outside of the Regency Ballroom. Walking between the buildings can take a considerable amount of time, especially between the House and the Senate. Plan on booking at least 30 minutes to get from one side to the other, including security check. Volunteers that have burning legislative questions while they are lobbying on the Hill can look for the lovely Ben Pendergrass. He's our CCL Senior Director of Government Affairs, and he will be on the Hill Tuesday. And also with him will be the just as lovely Taylor Krause. She is our National Outreach and Partnership Coordinator, and she'll be there to help you with questions regarding national outreach, endorsements, or statements of support. They will be on the Senate side in the morning at the cafe between the buildings of Dirksen and Hart, and on the House side in Rayburn Cafeteria in the afternoon around 1 and leaving by 4. There is construction on the Cannon side that makes getting around a little bit tricky. So plan on any meetings that you have in Cannon taking a little bit longer than usual to get to. Also, we are frequently asked what is allowable through security. Here is a quick list that the Russell Building Security provides us of prohibited items. Bear with me. Food or beverages, aerosol containers, any pointed objects, any bag larger than 14 inches wide by 13 inches high by 4 inches deep, backpacks, cans and bottles, and then the obvious. Razors, box cutters, knives, electric stun guns, martial arts weapons, guns, replica guns, ammunition, fireworks, mace or pepper spray, or non-aerosol spray.
So Mark, please remember to leave your nunchucks at home this time.
Also, please make sure to take off your CCL buttons because they will set off the alarm. It's also good to know that some of the buildings are numbered differently than you'd expect. If you have a meeting in Longworth or Rayburn, you'll notice that the number has 4 digits. So instead of the first number, it's the second number that tells you what floor the office is on. So Brett Guthrie's office. Anyone from Kentucky's 2nd Congressional District? Woo, we got one. Well, his building is on the 4th, or his office is on the 4th floor of Rayburn. Also, if you've heard anything about secret underground tunnels around the Capitol, it is true. And they can help you get to meetings faster with avoiding extra lines in security. Here's a map of the tunnel on the House side. To get to them, you'll go to the very bottom floor on any elevator or staircase, and then just follow the signs to direct you. Do note that the South Cannon Tunnel is closed for construction. And here's a map of the tunnels on the Senate side. You'll also go to the floor of these buildings to find these tunnels. and there are no planned closures on the Senate side at this time.
So one last announcement before we talk about the reception. The weather tomorrow will not be as wonderful as the weather was today. It will be colder and it will be raining, so please do be prepared for that. All right, so lastly, a day on the Hill can be exciting and stressful, but we hope to celebrate your political breakthroughs back at the hotel at our reception in the Ambassador Ballroom from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. We'll have mingling with your fellow CCLers, and we'll welcome our first-timers to share their experience and highlights from their day on the Hill. So while you're out on the Hill, please do remember to capture those moments to share with us at the reception. We'll have light hors d'oeuvres, and they'll be beginning at 7 p.m. So that's it. Again, if you have any questions about the things that we covered, you should first ask the veteran CCLers around you and your meeting leads. You should only be going to Amy if there's something very obviously wrong with your schedule. Otherwise, your CCL veterans and meeting leads can help you out. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you have an amazing lobby day.
Thank you.
Please welcome CCL Research Director Rick Knight.
I'm glad I at least get a chance to send you some electrons. So, I'm going to jump right in and say thanks. And the new personal carbon dividend calculator is what I want to talk about. It's an online tool to estimate the financial impact of the Energy Innovation Act in its first year on your household or anyone's. It's essentially an upgrade of the old carbon fee and dividend calculator, but with some very significant improvements that I'll explain. Like before, there are two main outputs. First, the carbon dividend, paid monthly with full shares to adults, half shares to children, and it counts as taxable income. And second, your carbon fee costs, which is the portion of carbon fees passed on to you in both direct and indirect kinds of energy. Now let me take a minute to preview what's been updated and what's new in this of the tool. All of the data files for the underlying model have been updated. All children in the households now receive dividends. Pass-through of carbon costs, according to recent research, is not always 100%, and that's also covered here, along with administrative costs of the policy, and the results will also show how the carbon fee costs can vary over a range. We've also added a new feature to accommodate shared residence living arrangements, which I'll explain when we do the test run. So with that, let's take it for a spin. To find it, you first go to the energyinnovationact.org website. That takes you to this home page, and up here at the upper right, you'll see how it works. And you go there and click, and it takes you to another page, and here in the upper right corner of this page is the link for the personal carbon dividend calculator. You go there and click, and you're on the start page, which gives you some basic information about the tool and what it's supposed to do. So you move your cursor to the Get Started button and click, taking you to a page that says, Describe your living situation. There are 4 boxes to choose from, and 2 of them mention the word housemates. So what's this about? If you look down below the lower left box, you'll see the words, Explain this. And if you go there and click, a box opens up to explain living situation. It says, this helps us calculate your dividends and carbon costs as accurately as possible. For this purpose, family means a financial unit such as a couple living together or a person or a couple living with children or other dependents. And it explains that housemates would include people sharing your residence who are not part of your family for income tax purposes, such as roommates sharing an apartment or boarders renting a room, children or parents with separate finances, or even another family sharing a house. So you close this window by clicking here. So let's do an example household, a couple with 2 kids. no housemates. You go here to I live with my family and click. That puts a check marks in the box you picked. Then you go down to next and click. And it opens up a screen that says, tell us a little bit about your family to get some key information. There's also a reminder that none of your data are stored anywhere. It's all vaporized when you close the tool. So you see the defaults, which are 2 adults and 0 children. Now this family has 2 adults, so no change is needed here. But they have 2 kids, so you go here and click. And then you slide up to select 2, click, and that puts 2 in the box for minor family members. Next, we have to enter the household income. This is needed because it affects the income tax burden on the dividend and helps estimate household spending that affects your carbon footprint. You can see that the default is $40,000. Well, let's say this family earns $50,000. You can change it either by typing in the box or by moving the slider bar, which is what we'll do. We just move the cursor to grab the button on the slider bar, and we click and drag and slide the income number up to $50,000. Now we go and click next, and we get another page where we have to put in a zip code. Let's put this family in Schenectady in upstate New York. Zip code 12303. We slide the cursor up to the zip code box and click there, then type in 12303. Cool. Now, let's look at the other inputs. They live in a standalone house, so that one doesn't need to change. And they have 2 cars, so that one stays the same. But here in Schenectady, they heat with oil, not natural gas. So you slide on down and you click here. That opens up the dialog box, and you can see that besides natural gas, there are several other choices. So for these folks, slide the cursor up and select heating oil, then click. So now all the inputs seem to be correct. You go to the next button and click, and the calculator crunches numbers from its database, and we get another screen. This is the utilities screen. It starts you out with a modeled estimate of gasoline, electricity, and heating. Those are your direct energy costs. And based on what it knows from the previous inputs, there are monthly average numbers that come from the model. But with these 3 sliders, you can fine-tune them to match your actual monthly costs if you know what they are. And I'll show you how that works. But for now, let's see what the numbers would look like for our model family if we just accept the defaults. You go down to Show Results and click. So here's the results screen. You can see that there's lots of information here. Up here, it shows the monthly carbon dividend for the family, which is $58. And remember that this is the after-tax amount. Under that is the net outcome, which shows that same dividend amount, and then the average monthly carbon costs, which is $35. Also, there is this where it tells you that the carbon costs could range from $17 to $53, depending on lifestyle. Just to make it clear that that $35 is not cast in stone, but it depends on energy use. So if you subtract the carbon cost from the dividend, this family comes out $23 ahead in an average month, assuming they live an average lifestyle for their income. Now let's scroll back up to the utility screen so we can see what difference it makes if, let's say, the family spends less than average on one of these costs. Let's say they have a hybrid car, like a used Prius for most of their driving. So instead of $270 a month, it turns out they only spend around $180. So this time, instead of using the slider, let's type the number in. We move the cursor up here, slide across to select, and then type in 180. Now Now let's scroll back down to see how the results change. You see that the dividend stays the same because that has nothing to do with energy spending. But the average monthly carbon cost went down from $35 to $30, which means their estimated gain goes up by $5. So if you know your direct energy spending, not only gasoline, but electricity and heating, you can get a more accurate estimate of how your finances will come out. Now, I want to also show you a couple more things. Down here at the bottom, if you want to post your results on social media or send them to someone in an email, those links are here. And if you want to print your results, you go over here and you click on the printer icon. And here's what pops up. You can print it out on your printer or save it as a PDF, and it shows everything on one page. And finally, you should know that there's an FAQ link on all of the pages except the first two. On this one, it's right here. And if you click it, it opens up a separate tab with 17 frequently answered questions and their answers. It gives you a lot more detail about the calculator. So that's the tour. And check it out for yourself. Run your own household and see how it responds to changes, and compare results with others in your chapter. But use some discretion when whipping out the calculator. Make sure your audience has some understanding of the policy first. Make sure you are practiced in its use in case you get questions. And if you want to use it in a lobby meeting, it's best if you've established a prior relationship rather than to jump into using it in a first meeting with an office. So I'll say thank you now and turn it over to the next speaker.
Please welcome Taylor Kraus.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you all here in DC. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Taylor Kraus, and I'm CCL's National Outreach and Partnership Coordinator on the Government Affairs team here in DC. As some of you may know, Stephanie Doyle was our Director of Outreach and National Partnership, whom I worked closely with, but Stephanie has moved on to the Nature Conservancy, and I've assumed many of her responsibilities. So in my role, my job is to make sure CCL lines of communication are not crossed when communicating and doing outreach to national groups. A little CCL vocab, national groups are usually referred to as NGOs, which mean non-government organizations. So my role is also to guide you in your outreach efforts to other groups and to help check if your work is the best use of your time. I like to think of myself as a switchboard operator, so you can come to me and I can go about connecting you with the right contacts or letting you know if there are volunteers or staff that are already managing those relationships. Most national groups have local groups, just how we have our CCL national staff and then our local chapters. If the group you're looking to do outreach with is a local group, then I encourage you to do outreach without seeking my permission. Also, there's an awesome CCL volunteer action team called the Grasstops Outreach Team, available if you're interested in doing local Grasstops outreach. I just ask, please keep in mind when you're doing any outreach that CCL is in this very rare bipartisan niche, and we have some stellar bipartisan street cred, so please just be judicious in your choices and with your group when you make working with other groups possible. So regarding national groups, we ask that you do not facilitate doing outreach to them before checking with me. One, there's a possibility of duplicating efforts, and that could just be your time otherwise better spent elsewhere. And two, it could possibly complicate a relationship that already exists between CCL and that organization. An example being, if there are 5 volunteers that are reaching out to National Sierra Club, whom I just saw in a meeting, this could come off as CCL not being organized and discount our abilities and therefore make Sierra Club less inclined to want to work with us, and we don't want that. So again, if you're interested in doing outreach with a national group, please just contact me first. Additionally, CCL has been around for a while, especially here in DC, which is a hub for national groups that are interested in climate policy. So we likely have a relationship with that national NGO. Also, DC can be a pretty small town sometimes, even more cozy when it comes to climate circles and in the environmental space. Therefore, we often see a lot of these folks in the same circles around town. So it's safe to assume that for big environmental groups like Sierra Club or the Environmental Defense Fund or the Nature Conservancy, that we already have a relationship there. However, I do not want to discourage you from doing outreach. I am just asking that you're mindful of our systems in place, and I can assure you they are put in place from experience. So I'm very thankful for all the amazing initiatives that you all have taken on. Volunteers within CCL really are the lifeblood of this organization, and I cannot do all the outreach alone. I just really do depend on all of your help. Just please check with me first. With that said, before you reach out to me, I highly recommend that you utilize the nifty tool that our staff has put together called the Grass Tops Engagement Tracker, which looks like this. This is the database that you can find on CCL Community, which logs all of the groups that CCL has sought endorsements from, not just on the bill, but also gauge their support of carbon fee and dividend, carbon pricing more generally, and climate action more broadly. Also, the website for the Energy Innovation Act has all of the endorsements and statements of support. So you might be asking yourself, what actually is an endorsement and a statement of support, and why do I care about them? Well, we care about them because members of Congress care about them. Endorsers, aka NGOs, businesses, prominent individuals that give an endorsement, as Adeline pointed out earlier in the day, were a top 3 topic brought up in our June meetings from Congress. Members of Congress want to hear from many groups supporting a bill, not just one. Therefore, it makes sense that members of Congress would be really interested in who we have been getting to support the bill, which is a lot of people. And since we are trying to build support from members of Congress, we therefore want to be doing outreach to groups that they care about. So this is why we care about endorsements and statements of support. But what exactly are endorsements and statements of support? Well, an endorsement is a full-fledged public approval of the bill as is, while a statement of support is a little bit different. Statements of support are more of a way that an NGO can say what they support about the bill and allows them more flexibility in showing support and possibly what they'd like to see differently. Statements of support are much more likely the way that we can garner support from big environmental groups that have national profiles or other groups. With that said, although getting endorsements for HR 763 from every NGO would be great, it's not very realistic. So it is the experience of our government affairs team that members of Congress tend to be just as excited about a statement of support as an endorsement. And sometimes it's even a little bit better because we can quote from their statement of support directly, and this often has proven to be very powerful in our meetings. So let's go over some of the statements of support that Andres highlighted earlier today, which you can find in your folder and looks like this. And it has some pretty big names on it. So there's the Environmental Defense Fund, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and Trout Unlimited, who you heard from the NGO panel earlier today. Also included in this handout is a resolution issued from the U.S. Conference of Mayors that is supporting carbon pricing more generally, and Andres also highlighted earlier in his remarks. But again, this handout is a fabulous tool that you can use in your meetings on the Hill tomorrow to show the diversity of support for HR 763. But it could be more useful to bring to your meetings endorsements and statements of support that your specific members of Congress care about. So if you'd like to access the full list of endorsements and statements of support, please go to the website energyinnovationact.org. To find the endorsements, you can go to the supporters tab that's circled here in red. You can then scroll to the bottom where you can see endorsers at a glance. That's also circled here in red, which categorizes the different groups that have submitted endorsements and can find a specific group that you're looking for and your member of Congress might care a little bit more about. So if you would like to see a full list of statements of support, you can go to the Statements tab, also circled here in red, to see the full list of statements of support that we've gotten from other NGOs. So let's talk about relationships. So it's useful to understand how members of Congress and NGOs are different because this will render our relationships with each to be different. I like to think of NGOs as neighbors. So NGOs live in the common areas of environmentalism, advocacy, and other common interests. And if you're all in the same neighborhood, it makes life so much easier sometimes to be friendly with those that live around you, right? And unlike your members of Congress, your neighbors don't have to listen to you. So when thinking about starting your neighborship, you would want to start it off by being friendly and finding common areas of interest, right? You would probably walk across the street, introduce yourself, and ask them what they're working on and make some small talk. You would possibly ask them about that new patio that they're putting together or what color they're thinking of painting their new door. Similar to how you would be doing outreach to another NGO, let's say the San Diego chapter for 350.org, and ask them about what they're working on. You wouldn't want to start off a good neighborship by going over to their place, knocking on their door, telling them how to build their patio, what color they should be painting their door, that they should be coming over to your place to help build your patio and painting your door. Right? So this means you shouldn't be going to 350 San Diego telling them they should be advocating for HR 763, working on carbon pricing, and that their advocacy methods are wrong. I'm glad you guys got that analogy. So you would want to ask them the different events that they have planned for the year, what kind of priorities that they have lined up, and if they would want to collaborate to find ways that CCL could potentially fit into all of that. And it's perfectly okay that you and your neighbor could potentially not find any projects that you can collaborate on. It's perfectly fine to live in the same neighborhood happily and have different colored doors. So this can seem like a really nuanced practice, and like I've said, in addition to being a switchboard operator, my role is to help guide you and get those endorsements and statements of support. I'd love to go into more detail about this, but I only have 10 minutes. So luckily, there are tons of resources and trainings online through CCL community about this, but if there was a main takeaway that I can give you in a few sentences, is that please come to me about outreach to national groups. Feel free to do outreach to local groups, and I strongly advise that your outreach to other groups should focus on groups that matter to your member of Congress. They are trying to please their constituents and ultimately voters, so you would want to do outreach to your members of Congress that they care about. Additionally, I want to encourage you to be creative. We are trying to do a really big thing that no one has ever done before, in a way that no one has ever done before. And I know with all the creativity, perseverance, and persistence that CCL practices, we'll make this happen. So get out there, be a good neighbor, and have great meetings with your members of Congress tomorrow.
Closer to the earth, you know.
Please welcome Jerry Hinkle.
Hi there, is this on? This is. Hey, economics. I wanted to give you an update. I want you to know the economic message of what we're doing has never been stronger. It's a real source of support for us. And I want to refine or just support your advocacy tools. I want to help you out here. So, 3 things that I want to get across to you. First of all, so this is a quote from the Columbia Report, number 1. We have near universal support among economists for exactly what we're doing. But I want you to fully understand why that is, because I think it'll help you in making that argument, if you will. Number 2, how do we show? We know that this is good for the economy and good for society, but how do we show that? How do we measure that? It's not looking at impacts to GDP. It's actually looking at cost-benefit analysis. We would weigh the benefits against the costs. Turns out the benefits are far greater than the costs. Okay, and that's how we know. Number 3, there's been some recent research on jobs, and I want to show you that as well. I love this. I hope you do too. January op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, 3,500 economists from across the political spectrum, right? Alan Greenspan to Janet Yellen and everybody in between. I think it indicates that we're really getting our handles on how to address climate change. That's what they're saying. This is the first big important step, okay? But why? Well, it turns out if you've got a product and it causes some damage, some harm, and that damage or harm isn't reflected in the price is off, then the economy is going to be off. You're going to misallocate resources. Now, what does that mean? Bottom line for us in this application, I'm from California, I speak from the heart, polluting can't be free. In the long run, it will be the ruin of us. From where I'm from, that process has begun. So I'm telling you, you're doing urgent work, and that's what we're up to, putting a price on carbon pollution, okay? Now, I want to give you a couple of examples of this process. Again, use this in your advocacy. So cigarettes, definitely something bad stems from that. And if you raise the price of cigarettes, you get less lung cancer, you get less heart disease, you get fewer premature deaths. Definitely we're better off, okay? Yeah, so that one's pretty straightforward. The same works, the same works for carbon pollution, okay? If you raise the price of fossil fuels, we're gonna get a decrease in these really strong storms. And in terms of the economy, we're going to need to devote fewer resources to the cleanup and restoration of these, okay? Now, what would GDP say about putting a price on carbon? There are measures that will look at GDP impacts, but they will only assess the cost of the policy. They will not assess the benefits, and that's why I'm steering you clear from GDP measures. You'll see them to cost-benefit analysis. Okay. That's how you evaluate policies and whether they're good for us, as you weigh the benefits and the costs. What are the benefits? Clearly, climate benefits. Also, health benefits are huge. And what are the costs? There can be a cost for this type of policy. And what it is, if you put a price on carbon, you're incenting producers to substitute slightly more expensive but cleaner sources of energy. And that slightly greater expense is the cost, essentially, okay? I want to drill down into the benefits. I love this. I think this would be useful for your advocacy. NOAA, every year, aggregates the billion-dollar weather and climate-related disasters, okay? And what we've done here is look by decade at the average annual cost of these disasters, okay? Do you notice a trend here? Yeah, you think? I love it. It's real obvious. So in the 80s, the average annual cost was $17 billion a year, okay? This decade, it's $83 billion a year. That's nearly a 500% increase. This is completely inflation adjusted. This is all 2019 dollars. This is climate change, okay? And where do you think it might be headed from here? So the point here, and again, use this in your advocacy, not addressing climate change is becoming increasingly expensive, and it's going to become much, much more so. We need to get off the dime on this, or it will cost, and this makes it clear. Okay. You know probably less about the very significant health co-benefits. So Dr. Drew Schindel, Duke University, real expert in the field, simulated a policy like ours, the emission reductions consistent with those that come from HR 763. And here's what he found. You're preventing 36,000 premature deaths a year, and he valued that at $250 billion per year. Wow, that's a wow number. Lots of other benefits. Children's emergency room asthma visits, 29,000 a year. 15,000 million lost work days a year, lost school days, etc. He didn't value of any of those, but when you do right by the climate, you're significantly improving our health, and it's immediate, right? It's tomorrow. So these are two key benefits. There may be others. So here's the cost-benefit analysis. There's some of these out there. This is the one I wanted to show you in part because this comes from the Golder-Hafstad model. And that model is becoming quite prominent. It's being used to evaluate not only our bill from Resources for the Future, I'll talk about that in a second, but it's evaluating all of the bills, currently, all the carbon pricing bills currently before Congress. And here's what it has to say. Okay, here's the cost. About 3.3 trillion, he went all the way out, okay, and discounted the values back to a total cost of 3.3 trillion. I will tell you this model is a little harder on economic costs than most, so that's significant, right? Spend a little bit more time, ooh, I almost forwarded it. Here are the climate benefits, little over 5, almost twice, but these are very conservative. These came from the Obama-era EPA estimates, mostly based in 2010, a little bit in 2016, slight update. Look, we've learned a lot since then. The more recent, and I'll show you, by the way, I'll have all the references for all this work on the last slide, and you can copy them down. There's a blog post on this. The more recent comprehensive analysis of climate benefits or climate costs and the benefits that you get should you reduce climate pollution are 8 times that amount. Okay, so there's a lot of uncertainty, but it looks a whole lot higher than that. We're learning some things, and a lot of that's incorporated into the newer estimates. So call it 2 to a lot times higher, the climate benefits relative to the costs. There you've got the health co-benefits, almost 3 times the cost, or of the cost of the policy. Total over 14 trillion, a little over 4.25 times the cost. That's the summary figure here. What's the point for your advocacy? But how do we know? You tell me that these economists tell me it's good for the economy, good for society. How do we know? I want to see a number. I want to see a measure. Here it is. You weigh the costs against the benefits, and the benefits are many times the cost. That's a consistent finding. We know that. That's key to why those economists are advocating for a policy much like ours. Okay, people said, oh, you're going to talk about the new analysis, and I'm not. I'm going to throw this slide up and walk away. But this is important. We have 2 new analyses of our bill. The first is the Columbia report. You'll find it, there's the name, you'll find it on our website. Also, the primary author of this report, Noah Kaufman, will be on the CCL University this Thursday night at 8 o'clock. So definitely come check that out. It's a fabulous report. It really will make clear the various benefits of our policy. Also, the RFF carbon pricing calculator I just talked about. So this will look at the key impacts of not just our bill, but the 7 carbon pricing bills before Congress. Really a cool tool. Fun to go play around with, and I'll show you the website to get a hold of that. And these models don't address jobs well, so they don't look at them. That's not where you're going to be able to go. But there's been some really great recent research. And I want to give you the bottom line, steering us in a slightly different direction, but here's one of the things that I'm trying to do here. We had our bill, we had our analysis of it. These days, it's not our bill. It is Ted Deutsch's bill. It's in the public domain. These folks are analyzing. Congress trusts these folks as the independent experts, and so I'm trying to show you what they're going to be saying about it. I think it's really important that we go hand in hand. Here's what's being said about jobs. The bottom line, again, this is resources for the future. The long-run impacts on jobs of a bill like ours are pretty small, okay? There are going to be significant job reallocation, right? We're going to move a lot of jobs from polluting industries to clean industries. That is as it must be. That makes sense, right? And there's going to be some pain there, and we need to recognize this. But if you look at just the energy sector, which we know is clear, this is the one impacted by a carbon price, okay? It's clear that we're going to shift from fossil fuels to two things, renewables and energy efficiency. And it turns out that renewables and energy efficiency are much more labor intensive. Big time net job creation, it's a very good story. Well, if you look at it on a per dollar invested, it's about 3 times the jobs for renewables and energy efficiency. Fossil fuels have become mechanized, the extraction of, okay? If you look at it on a per gigawatt hour generated, wind's about 1.5 times, thank you. Energy efficiency is about 4 times the jobs, solar's about 8 times the jobs. Really good job story. So I got to get out of here. I just wanted to show you this. Same thing. This is from the World Bank, though. Nice, credible source. And I'll let you take a second to just look at this. But job creation from a dollar spent of fossil fuels right here, not a whole lot. Here is renewables and energy efficiency, right around 3 times as many. Great, great job story. That is it for me. That's what I wanted to tell you. So we got a great message. Okay, I'm going to just underline these and get out of here. Look at, we need to charge for pollution, right? It will be the ruin of us if we don't. We know that it's good for the economy and society because of cost-benefit analysis, and the job picture is a very good one. And the cane has formally come my way and pulled me aside. Please, I think it's time for questions, and I think Taylor's coming up, and I hope Rick will be available from the Chicago area.
All right, so this first question is for Rick, who's joining us via Zoom, and this is back to the calculator. Why is the cost of the calculator simplified to not include some additional outputs like transportation or food choices, Rick?
So, yeah, this is a fair question. It's something we wrestled with when first designing the calculator. And the simple answer is we wanted to strike the right balance between simplicity and accuracy or completeness. And this is where we landed. If you ask a question, say, about transportation choices like air travel or about diet, then how deep do you go? And what about all the other carbon costs that don't fall into those categories? Like how many shirts do you buy in a year? Or how many times do you go to the theater and so on? All those things affect your carbon footprint. So if we start going down that road, it would be quite a task. It doesn't mean that we won't consider it in the future, but right now we wanted to opt for something that was fairly simple and quick to use.
Jerry, we discussed how fossil fuel jobs lost are better paying than clean energy jobs created. What should be done about that?
I don't know that there's a lot that we can do about that. I think as the industry matures, there will probably be some mechanization in renewables and energy efficiency. Here's the real job opportunity with the low carbon technology future that we know we need to embrace. There's now a race on to innovate for the low carbon products. And we're not that engaged in it because there's not sufficient financial incentives. When we get significant financial incentives, okay, there's going to be a lot more R&D. And if you can create that next generation of low carbon technologies, you can begin to export it. And much higher, there are needs for these technologies all over the planet. That's where the real job creation is going to come from. And what I would tell my member of Congress is that we're behind. This race has begun, and we don't have our shoes on yet, and we got to get them on. So that's what there is to do about this.
Can you remind us what RFF stands for? And then, Taylor, this will go over to you. Can renewable energy companies endorse the bill as well, or only NGOs?
Resources for the future.
Yes, so this is great. I only asked for yes or no questions, so yes. Renewable energy companies can endorse the bill. And if you would like to do outreach to that, I'd also be happy to help you. We do have the business climate leaders who do lead outreach to businesses. And yep.
Jerry, is it okay to continue quoting the REMI 2.1 million jobs number?
Yeah, I think we're looking at that. That was one good analysis, and I think we've just come to, what's happened in the more recent research is we're taking a much deeper dive, a much more detailed look, and we're seeing that it's just not quite as easy as that. We're going to sit down after the conference is over and talk about that very topic. So more to you in a couple of months on that. But we feel very good about the jobs impact of our policy, and that number does reflect that. That level of precision is probably not appropriate.
Thanks. Why does the revenue recycling method affect the value of the climate and health benefits?
Yeah. Wow, good question. You saw that up there, huh? That was great, because what Resources for the Future did, or what this book did, they looked at just our policy, but as well, should the funds go back to income tax reductions, payroll tax deductions, corporate tax deductions. You get a slightly greater increase in emission reductions with our bill, I believe is what it is. So you're going to have a little bit greater health reduction, or health benefit. I think that may be the key, because you're getting a little bit, here's what our bill does relative to those, okay? It's much more fair. It's much better for the poor and middle income. They benefit significantly from our bill, okay? And there's a slightly greater economic drag. And to see that perfectly, you'd go to the RFF calculator, because you can put the bills up and just compare them side to side. So those are the key differences. That's why we like our bill, because being fair to the poor and middle class is very important to us. Yeah, that's the key difference. And we get strong emission reductions.
Okay, Taylor, this is not a yes or no question, I'm sorry. What is CCL's policy concerning outreach to local military installations?
If this is in terms of local outreach, I encourage and empower you to do that on your own and use your best discretion for that. If there is a fuzzy line, though, and you're not really sure, that's what my job is for. So feel free to email me and reach out to me, and we can probably get more into the weeds of how that affects your relationships with your members of Congress, which again is one of my main points, is that I'd love for all of you to use your time to the best use, which is to groups or businesses or other installations that matter to your member of Congress.
Jerry, my goodness, we have so many questions about jobs. I'm going to try and combine a couple of these. So according to the REMI study, a lot of the job creation were was in other industries like healthcare, service industries. Is that still the case from these new studies that we're seeing? Are there other industries that will experience a job stimulus? And then what's the role of unions in this, and how should CCL interplay with unions? Is that work happening?
Yeah. They're not as specific. And much of the message is there's a number of dynamics in terms of what happens to labor markets that just aren't considered in standard analysis. And that's why their primary finding is, look, one of the things that they're saying is doubt the studies that you've seen before. Key to this for us, you will hear again, it's a job killer. These studies make clear, we've done a deeper dive, we know more. It is not. There will be minimal impacts. But I haven't seen, that was the great thing about REMI, is it gave you answers when you wanted answers. It gave you specifics. You know, this industry, this industry. The recent analysis does not have that. To labor unions, I think that there are an abundance of jobs. We're clear about that. In renewables and in energy efficiency. That has already begun. To keep my presentation short, what I didn't show you is that those industries, the job growth has been 4 times what it's been in fossil fuels over the last 3 years. It's begun to happen without a price on carbon. We're quite sure that given a little incentive to do the right thing, instead of just relying on your conscience, there will be a boom in that area. And I think those folks are going to be fine.
Taylor, what do we tell folks that are working in the NGO industry or volunteers for other NGOs when their response is that they're not interested in supporting the Energy Innovation Act because it, quote, guts the Clean Air Act, unquote?
Ooh, this is a good one. So in terms of different NGOs, Citizens Climate Lobby has its own theory of change, where we are trying to find a very bipartisan solution. So no matter what the turnover of the next administration is, will be a sustainable solution throughout time. In terms of the Clean Air Act specifically, this is something that is a major point of contention with a few groups in terms of what our bill does. But whenever I sit down with groups that don't agree with us or they seem a little bit hostile, I try not to focus so much on the policy details, because when you're talking about the sausage making of a bill and what's going to happen, you're really speculating. So I try to find common areas of interest and trying to find other ways of collaborating. Because climate change is such an interdisciplinary topic, I'm sure there are different ways that we can collaborate and find other ways of overlap that our membership can use. And if you ever get stuck in a sticky situation like that, we do have talking points on this online, and again, I'd be happy to coach you through that conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We commissioned those 7 videos so that we could share some of the grassroots advocacy that's behind the Energy Innovation Act. And so we will be releasing them starting next week, one at a time. They'll be available on the Energy Innovation Act site and also through social media and on community, and you'll hear more about it. But I would be remiss in if we didn't thank the CCLers who participated in the filming of those videos. First of all, they are amazing people. Yeah, here we got it. And second of all, they gave several days of time to Ben Stillerman, who was our documentary filmmaker on this. And so together, those guys were able to collaborate into something special. Thank you.
So I've attended 3 CCL conferences as an intern, and I absolutely loved it. But it was hard. So our interns, they arrive days before us. They're up before us, working at 7 a.m. They stay up after us, working until 10 p.m. They share beds with 4 interns to a room, and they miss most of the conference sessions because they're working in the background to make sure everything's running smoothly. This conference would not be as amazing as it is without the hard work from our 14 interns, and I would like to welcome them up on the stage so we can recognize all the work that they do.
Being on the reservation, the Navajo Nation,
So March 16th, 2009 was the first day that I went to the San Diego CCL office. I rode my bike in San Diego down to the Coronado Ferry. I hopped on the ferry and went down Orange Avenue and found the address, 1330 Orange Avenue. In fact, there was a building. I went to the 3rd floor. I found Marshall and Olivia, and they greeted me and said they were really happy for me to be there. And we chatted for a little bit, and then Marshall walked me down the hall to another office, and he said, here's your desk, here's your phone. We need some more of these groups. And I'm like, great. Not everybody loves working like that, but I do. I like it where somebody says, you know, I trust you, go make something happen. And so I said to myself, okay, let's go build CCL. So many of you know that Marshall came back a couple hours later, and he said, I just have one more thing to say. And what he had with him was this book called Gandhi the Man, written by Eknath Easwaran. Oops. There we go. And Easwaran is a kind of a spiritual guide of Marshall's. For years, he always brought sayings in of Easwaran, and this is a particularly lovely book. There's so many anecdotes that I loved. They asked Gandhi why he traveled 3rd class in the train. You know, he was a London-based attorney. He should be in 1st class, but he chose to ride with the lowest class people, and they said, why do you ride in 3rd class? He said, because there's no 4th class. He was arrested all the time, and when they asked for his address, he always gave them the address of the jail. I just found there's a lot of really beauty that came out in this telling of the story. The other thing I love about this particular copy, across the top of it, it says, in stamped, Queensboro Public Library. And across the bottom of it, it got chewed up by Marshall's dog, and so it's all taped over. It's very typical of Marshall. For the first years we were traveling, his carry-on bag, he replaced the zipper so he didn't have to buy a new one. And he was driving a 26-year-old Volvo. The first part of this story, I think most of you are really familiar with. Gandhi had already developed the essentials of his later style, and it is easy to picture him sitting before the able Boer soldier, informing him quietly, this is General Smuts. I've come to tell you that I'm going to fight against your government. Smuts must have thought he was hearing things. You mean you've come to tell me that? He laughs. Is there anything more you want to say? Yes, said Gandhi, I'm going to win. Smuts is astonished. Well, at last he says, how are you going to do that? Gandhi smiles and says, with your help. That's not the part that's important to me tonight. The part that's important to me tonight is what happens next in the book. Many years later, Smuts admitted, not without humor, that this is exactly what Gandhi did. And I think these next 3 lines are as good a description of the people sitting in this room that I've ever read. By his courage, by his determination, by his refusal to take unfair advantage, but especially by his endless capacity to stick it out without yielding and without retaliation. Gandhi managed at least to win the general's respect and friendship. In 1914, the laws most offensive to Indians were repealed and basic civil rights voted into law. You're amazing people. Let's have a big day on the Hill tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow night. Everybody. Thank you.